One point I do want to make, though, about this game between SMU and Clemson is what happens to the rankings with a win from either team. If SMU wins this game and they beat Clemson, SMU will lock up the bye week and be the 3rd seed in the playoffs. The winner of the SEC championship will be number 2, and the winner of the Big Ten championship will be number 1. That's set in stone. If SMU beats Clemson, SMU will lock up the 3rd bye. And then if Boise beats UNLV, they'll probably be 4th, so on and so forth. But if SMU wins, they'll lock up the bye. Clemson will miss the playoffs, and Alabama will be the last at-large bid team in. But here's where it gets interesting. What happens if Clemson goes out there and beats Alabama? According to the College Football Committee, there was a report saying that, well, depending on how the game goes, SMU could move up, could move down. Not ruling out the fact that Bama could get in as a final at-large bid over SMU if SMU suffers a loss. And if that were to happen, it would be the worst decision made of all time. When you look at SMU's football team, right now they're the 8th team in the rankings, right? They're well above Alabama. No matter who is in their conference championship game, if you are ranked as an at-large bid team and you were to go out there and you lose your game, right, and you lose, you should not be punished for it. So if SMU goes out there and loses to Clemson, even if it's by 1,000 points, SMU should still make the playoffs because it's not their fault for having to play an extra game. It's not their fault for being successful. So SMU should 120% be guaranteed a spot. The only possibility, the only reason why I can think of the committee saying, well, depending on what happens, SMU may move up, may move down. The thing that comes to mind is what happened with Jordan Travis and Florida State last year. Jordan Travis got hurt. Florida State was a completely different team. They looked not very good without Travis. And as we saw, what the committee says is if you have a key player or a key coach out entering the playoffs, that can prevent you from making the playoffs. And that's what happened to Florida State. Their best player on offense, Jordan Travis, was out. So they didn't make the playoffs. Let's say Kevin Jennings, the QB for SMU, goes out there and gets hurt, right? God forbid it happens, but let's say that happens. SMU, even with the loss and Kevin Jennings being injured, should still make the playoffs. Why? Because they have a very good backup in Preston Smith. Obviously, he got benched to many surprise, but he was a top 3 ACC quarterback entering this year. So it's one thing to say, well, SMU's the last team in right now, so if they lose their starting QB, okay. They would have to move down 4 spots. 4 spots. And I don't believe a loss should even move them at all, period. But on top of that, I don't think an injured Kevin Jennings should move him down 4 spots. Pivoting to a different team, let's say SMU beats Clemson. Here's a team that people are forgetting about. Boise State. As of right now, if SMU beats Clemson and Boise State loses to UNLV, UNLV gets an automatic bid as the 5th conference champ. Boise State would be the last at-large bid team in. People are forgetting about this. Boise State, as well as SMU, should not be punished for losing a game. If SMU beats Clemson, UNLV beats Boise State should be the last at-large bid team over Alabama, even if they lose by 1,000. Because again, if the playoffs were to start right now, Boise State would be a higher at-large bid than Alabama. They're at 10, Bama's at 11. Therefore, Boise State should remain in the playoffs even with a loss. Again, it gets a little bit different. If Ginty gets injured, that's the heart and their soul of the team, right? But again, injuries aside, Boise State, if they come out of it healthy, with a loss to UNLV, they should be an at-large bid team still, as long as, again, SMU were to beat Clemson. Because if Clemson were to beat SMU, then SMU would unfortunately would bounce Boise State out of the playoffs if Boise State loses to UNLV. So these are important storylines to keep an eye on. And this is really going to determine how the committee is viewed and how the playoffs will be viewed for the years to come. Because as I alluded to before, what you do in the past dictates how you move forward in the future. Time will tell what happens. Rounding back to the South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss situation. A lot of people were very upset that Alabama, as of now, if the 5 conference champs were to be SMU, Boise State, and then you can pick the rest you can pick the rest, whoever wins, whoever loses. Big Ten, SEC, the winner and the loser both make the playoffs. Loser of the Big 12 obviously isn't even in the picture. So if that's how the bracket falls, Bama would be the last team in. People are very disappointed because there was a 3-team race between Bama, Ole Miss, and USC at 9-3 in the SEC. A lot of people, nearly 95% of people, probably more than that, believe South Carolina deserved that last at-large spot over Bama and Ole Miss. But the reality of the situation is they don't, and the committee got it right. It should be Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, in that order of those 3 SEC teams. The biggest reasoning behind it is head-to-head competition matters. Okay? People want to look at comparable components, right? Common opponents. People want to look at the strength of schedule, right? And these are important when it comes to valuing teams that aren't in the same conference or valuing teams when you haven't played each other. South Carolina, Ole Miss, Bama have all played each other. Well, Bama hasn't played Ole Miss, but South Carolina's played Bama. They played Ole Miss. And they're all in the same conference. So why does South Carolina deserve to be ranked below Bama and Ole Miss? It's because they lost to the both of them. You can make a point that, well, hold up, Madsen. Bama lost to Vanderbilt and South Carolina beat them. And what do I care? Well, South Carolina only lost to Bama by 2. If you look up the CFP, if you go on CFP.com, right, here's the website for you folks. collegefootballplayoff.com, and you look at their rules, they say that points, however many points you win by or lose by against a team, does not affect where you are. It's just if you won or if you lost, right? When you look at these teams and how when they played each other, yes, Vanderbilt beat Bama and they lost to South Carolina. Doesn't matter what the score was. So then it comes down to who won when they faced each other. Bama beat South Carolina. Ole Miss beat South Carolina. When you have the same record and you're in the same conference, head-to-head matters the most. And unfortunately for the Gamecocks, they couldn't beat Bama or Ole Miss. So therefore, they're ranked below them, rightfully so. Common opponent does not hold weight at all when head-to-head exists. It only holds weight when head-to-head doesn't exist. That's when you look at Ole Miss, and that's when you look at Alabama's head-to-head matchup. And for the both of them, they both are 3-1, common opponent. And for the both of them, they're both 3-1 when it comes to common opponent. But when you look at the range of strength of schedule, then Alabama beats out Ole Miss when it comes to strength of schedule. Alabama has the 16th strength of schedule, while Ole Miss has the 31st. So when you take in all these data points and all these factors, Alabama deserves the final at-large spot over both Ole Miss and South Carolina. There's no argument against it. There can't be. The only argument that any of these teams should be making, I guess only Ole Miss and South Carolina, is that they should be ranked above Miami. And they should, honestly, be ranked above Miami. Why? Because the strength of schedule is so wide between the three schools that a Miami 10-2 is equivalent to a Ole Miss South Carolina 9-3. Miami has a 55th strength of schedule. Ole Miss is 31st. South Carolina is 14th. Let's be real, all right? Let's be real. Miami does not deserve to be above these two teams. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. They're all missing the playoffs. But the only thing that Ole Miss and South Carolina should be disappointed about is the fact that Miami is somehow miraculously ranked above them, which should not be the case. Miami is a far worse football team than those two schools, right? 10-2, Miami is not a better version of a 9-3 Ole Miss or South Carolina. And when you look at who they've beaten, I mean, come on. It's night and day. It's night and day. It's night and day. Ole Miss has beaten South Carolina, we'll say yes, and Georgia. Okay? South Carolina has beaten numerous ranked opponents. Miami hasn't even played one. I guess now currently Syracuse, and they lost to them. So, let's be real. Let's be real here.